Elite professor forces a young black man to solve a physics problem, unaware that he is a physics genius. Will this unexpected challenge reveal a hidden talent? What do you think you're doing in my class? Dr. Richard Coleman's voice cut through the auditorium like a razor, silencing all 200 students in attendance. His eyes were fixed on Marcus Johnson, the only black student sitting in the front row of Princeton University's prestigious advanced physics course. Marcus, 19, remained motionless, his calm gaze contrasting with the growing hostility of the renowned theoretical physicist in front of him. The tension was palpable as the silence stretched into seconds that seemed like an eternity. "I asked what you're doing in my class," Coleman repeated, adjusting his expensive glasses as he approached. "This is a course for students with exceptional IQs, not for those who got in through quotas." Nervous murmurs filled the auditorium. Marcus had shown up unannounced without being officially enrolled, sitting in the front row as if he belonged there. For Coleman, winner of international awards and author of revolutionary theories on quantum physics, his presence was a personal affront. "I'm here to learn physics, sir," Marcus replied, his voice surprisingly firm. Coleman laughed dryly. "Learn physics? You don't even know what we're talking about here." He gestured to the blackboard covered with complex equations. "This isn't high school physics, young man." What no one in that room knew was that Marcus Johnson had grown up in one of Newark's most dangerous neighborhoods, where schools barely had qualified teachers. At age 12, he found a discarded physics book in a dumpster. And since then, science had become his refuge from the violence that surrounded him. What they also didn't know was that he had read every article Dr. Coleman had ever published. "Maybe we can solve this in a practical way," Coleman said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Since you're so eager to learn, why don't you come up here and solve this problem?" He pointed to a particularly complex equation in the corner of the blackboard, a quantum electrodynamics problem that would typically take hours to solve. The students exchanged nervous glances. This was an impossible test, deliberately chosen to humiliate the intruder and reaffirm the professor's authority. What hidden genius will Marcus unveil next? Stay tuned to Black Voices to find out. Marcus hesitated for only a second before standing up. As he walked to the blackboard, flashbacks flooded his mind. The night studying by candlelight when the electricity was out, the books rescued from discarded libraries, the mockery of classmates who didn't understand his passion for science. "You have 1 hour," announced Coleman, glancing at his watch with anticipatory satisfaction. "Or rather, you have until the end of class to at least try." Marcus picked up the chalk, his fingers steady despite the pressure. As he examined the problem, a strange calm enveloped him. Equations to him had always been like a secret language, a code that revealed the deepest mysteries of the universe. Behind him, Coleman stepped away, returning to his desk with a certainty that he had just put the intruder in his place. What he didn't notice was the gleam in Marcus' eyes, the slight smile that was beginning to form on his lips. "Do you mind if I use the Coleman-Weinstein approach to solve this?" Marcus asked calmly, referring to an advanced method that the professor himself had developed years ago. Coleman's eyebrows rose in surprise. How did this young man know about his collaborative work with Weinstein, published only in highly specialized scientific journals? As Marcus' chalk slid across the blackboard with surprising precision, a different silence fell over the auditorium. It was no longer a tense silence, but one of growing amazement. The young man's hands moved with the confidence of a conductor, translating complex thoughts into elegant mathematical symbols. In the audience, an Asian student named Min watched with particular interest. As a research fellow under Coleman, she recognized the innovative approach Marcus was using. It wasn't just a reproduction of the theory, but his own interpretation almost improved. Coleman remained motionless, his expression oscillating between disbelief and growing unease. There was something about the young man's demeanor, the ease with which he manipulated concepts that made doctoral students sweat, that suggested a much more complex history than he had assumed. What no one in that room could have imagined was that this impromptu confrontation was not just about a physics problem. It was the prelude to a turning point that would shake the very foundations not only of that university, but of the entire academic elitism Marcus had faced since he dared to dream of the stars. If this story of prejudice and hidden genius has piqued your curiosity, be sure to sign up to find out how a single challenge could turn into the greatest lesson this renowned professor would ever receive. Marcus continued solving the problem on the blackboard as the whispers in the auditorium grew louder. In 20 minutes, not an hour, his skilled hands completed a solution that left even the brightest students speechless. The silence that followed was different. It was no longer one of derision, but of reluctant admiration. "Impossible," Coleman muttered, leaning forward to examine the solution. "You must have memorized this specific problem." Marcus shook his head. "No, sir. I just applied the transformation you published in the Journal of Quantum Physics in 2020, but with a variation that eliminates 3 intermediate steps." Coleman turned pale. That article had fewer than 100 citations and was considered one of his most esoteric contributions. How could this young man know it in such depth? "Class dismissed," he announced abruptly. "You," he pointed at Marcus, "in my office. Now." As the students filed out, murmuring excitedly about what they had witnessed, Min, the research assistant, deliberately dropped several papers near Marcus. "Help me with these," she said quietly as she bent down. Close to the floor, shielded from others' gaze, she whispered, "He's going to try to destroy you. I've seen it before. Meet me in the library at 7 p.m. Quantum Physics section. Bring a flash drive." In Coleman's elegant office decorated with photos of him alongside Nobel laureates and presidents, the confrontation continued. "I want to know who really solved that equation for you," he demanded, throwing a folder across the table. "His file says he comes from a public school in Newark. No math competitions, no science awards. Explain how that's possible." Marcus took a deep breath. "I taught myself, sir, since I was 12. "Lies," Coleman slammed his fist on the table. "Someone is using you to demoralize me. Was it Takahashi or Goldstein from MIT? "No one is using me," Marcus replied calmly. "I can prove it with any other problem you choose." Coleman's eyes narrowed. "Have you heard of superstring theory? I want a complete essay on its implications for unifying general relativity with quantum mechanics by Friday. 10 pages with equations. Impossible without formal training." "I'll have it by Thursday," Marcus replied, holding the professor's gaze. When he left the office, he felt exhausted. That confrontation had not been part of the plan. Marcus had spent the last 6 months meticulously preparing to get into college. After having his scholarship application rejected 3 times, despite his perfect grades, he had developed a bold plan. At 7 p.m. in the nearly empty library, he found Min in the designated section. "Why are you helping me?" he asked suspiciously. Min looked around before answering. "Because I know what it's like to be judged by your appearance, not your knowledge." She showed him a flash drive. "Coleman isn't just prejudiced, he's dishonest. 2 years ago, he stole a theory from an international doctoral student and published it as his own. The student was expelled when he complained. Marcus absorbed that information with a knot in his stomach. How did you get this information? I'm his assistant. I have access to everything. She hesitated, including the next article he's going to publish. It's revolutionary, but he didn't develop it. Professor Thompson did. Before he died of a heart attack that night, in the small apartment he shared with his mother, a nurse who worked double shifts, Marcus opened his hidden closet, a loose board on the floor that concealed hundreds of meticulous notes, scientific articles printed on recycled paper, and journals filled with equations. Among the papers were rejection letters from Princeton University. Unfortunately, your qualifications, while impressive, do not meet the standards of excellence required by our program. With a dim light illuminating his small sanctuary of knowledge, Marcus sent an email to the physics department. I formally request to enroll in Dr. Coleman's advanced course as my right under the Expanded Access Program. He knew this would trigger an administrative review. Coleman would be forced to publicly justify any refusal. Over the next few days, Marcus divided his time between preparing his essay on superstrings and something much more ambitious. Using the information provided by Min, he began analyzing Coleman's next big work and discovered not only that it was plagiarized, but that it contained fundamental flaws that the professor had failed to notice when he appropriated someone else's work. In the university cafeteria a few days later, Min found him again. "Coleman is looking into your background. He found out that you applied 3 times and were rejected each time. He's convinced that you're being manipulated by some academic rival." "Perfect," Marcus replied with a discreet smile. "Let him think that." "What are you planning?" asked Min, intrigued by his calmness. "Justice," he replied simply. "Not just for myself." What no one knew, not even Min, was that Marcus wasn't just fighting for himself. In his neighborhood in Newark, he secretly tutored physics and math to teenagers like himself, bright young people without opportunities rejected by a system that judged them by the color of their skin, their zip code, or their last name. On Thursday, as promised, Marcus handed in his essay on superstring theory. It wasn't 10 pages, but 25 with an original approach that linked the theory to the latest discoveries in particle physics. Coleman leafed through the document with growing suspicion, which turned into ill-concealed amazement. "This is surprising," he finally admitted. "But it doesn't change anything. You're still an intruder in my class." "Not for long," Marcus replied calmly. "The academic committee meeting is tomorrow at 10 a.m. I'll be there to argue for your formal admission." What Coleman didn't notice as he dismissed Marcus with an arrogant gesture was the small smile forming on the young man's face. The kind of smile that only appears when all the pieces of a meticulous plan begin to fall perfectly into place. That same night, as the campus quieted down, light still shone in 2 distant windows. In the first, Coleman frantically reviewed his next big article, the one that would secure his place in the history of physics. In the second, much smaller and more modest, Marcus Johnson finished his own analysis of the same work, an analysis that would reveal much more than brilliant equations. The next day, the immaculate meeting hall would become the scene of one of the greatest reversals that the century-old institution had ever witnessed. And while the university slept, unaware of the storm approaching, something extraordinary had already begun to happen. Fear had changed sides. The Princeton University meeting hall was packed when Marcus entered. The academic committee, 6 full professors, and the dean occupied a raised table. Coleman, impeccable in his expensive suit, wore a confident smile. "Mr. Johnson requests formal admission to Dr. Coleman's advanced course," announced Dr. Harris, chair of the committee. "Dr. Coleman, I understand you have objections." Coleman rose with the confidence of someone who had never lost an academic battle. "This young man does not have the necessary qualifications. His presence would compromise the scientific rigor that our institution—" "If I may," Marcus interrupted, his calm voice filling the hall. "I would like to submit 2 documents for the committee's consideration." Coleman frowned as Marcus distributed folders to the members. "The first document is my essay on superstring theory, which Dr. Coleman himself described as astonishing." The professors leafed through the work with expressions of growing interest. "This is extraordinarily sophisticated," murmured Dr. Peterson, a specialist in theoretical physics. "The second document," Marcus continued, his voice changing subtly, "is a comparative analysis between Dr. Coleman's forthcoming major article soon to be published and the unpublished work of the late Professor Thomson." Coleman's face drained of color. "That's absurd." "A desperate attempt to page 3, paragraph 2, Marcus said calmly. "The mathematical derivation is identical, word for word, symbol for symbol, to Thomson's manuscript." A deathly silence fell over the room as the committee quickly checked the indicated pages. "That proves nothing." Coleman recovered partially. "Thomson and I collaborated frequently." Marcus nodded. "That's why I also included on page 7 proof of the critical error that Dr. Coleman failed to notice when copying the work. An error that would completely invalidate the theory if published. An error that any physicist who truly understood the work would have noticed." Coleman's face twisted in anger. "Who's behind this? Goldstein? Takahashi? Who's manipulating this boy?" "No one is manipulating me," Marcus replied, remaining unperturbed. "Just as no one taught me advanced physics. I taught myself from books salvaged from the trash and articles printed on recycled paper." Marcus turned to the committee. "I didn't come here to expose Dr. Coleman. I came because I deserve the same opportunity as any other student with my level of knowledge." Men rose from the audience. "I can confirm all of this. As Dr. Coleman's assistant, I have access to Thomson's original documents, and this isn't the first case." Dr. Peterson removed his glasses and rubbed his eyes in disbelief. "Coleman, is this true?" Coleman's silence was answer enough. His academic empire built on prestige and intimidation was crumbling before his eyes. "I also have testimony from 3 other students," Marcus added, placing a flash drive on the table. "All international, all marginalized when they questioned the use of his ideas." Dr. Harris looked directly at Coleman. "A formal investigation will be launched immediately." Turning to Marcus, she said, "As for your request, Mr. Johnson, you are officially accepted into the program with a full scholarship." Coleman exploded. "You can't do this." I'm Richard Coleman. My name is in fundamental theory that which I corrected on the board last week, Marcus added without arrogance, just stating a fact. And honestly, credit has never been important to me, only physics. Get out, Coleman shouted, lunging toward Marcus. Two security guards quickly restrained him. Richard Coleman, you are suspended from your duties until the investigation is complete, Dr. Harris declared, her voice firm. As the hall exploded in murmurs, Marcus remained calm. There was no visible satisfaction on his face, only the serenity of someone who had finally been able to show his true ability. From the back of the room, someone began to applaud. Soon, others joined in, and a wave of applause filled the room. Among the faces in the crowd, Marcus recognized several minority students who had been silenced for years in this system. At that historic moment, as Coleman was escorted out of the room, something much bigger than a simple case of plagiarism was being exposed, an entire system built to keep certain groups at the top and others invisible. The young man from Newark had not only earned his place, he had started a silent revolution that would echo through the halls of the prestigious institution for generations. And as the applause grew, a question hung in the air. How many other Marcus Johnsons were there around the world? Their brilliant minds overshadowed not by a lack of ability, but by a system that refused to see them. 3 months later, Princeton University's main auditorium was packed, not for a regular class, but for the first official lecture of the newest member of the faculty, Assistant Professor Marcus Johnson, age 19. The buzz died down as he took the stage, now wearing an official faculty badge. Welcome to the first class of Applied Quantum Physics. Rethinking the fundamentals, Marcus began, his confident voice resonating in the same space where he had been humiliated months earlier. In the front rows, students from various courses, including many young Black, Latino, and other minority students who rarely ventured into the realm of advanced physics, watched in awe. Among them was Marcus' mother, a nurse, who had switched her shift to witness this moment. Marcus had become an unlikely symbol of institutional change. The investigation into Coleman revealed not only systematic cases of plagiarism, but decades of discrimination against minority students. 6 other professors were investigated and 2 resigned when their own academic skeletons came to light. Physics, Marcus explained as he unrolled elegant equations on the digital whiteboard, does not belong to any race, social class, or gender. It belongs to those who have the courage to question and the humility to learn. In the back row, men smiled discreetly. Now the coordinator of the outreach program Marcus had created, she helped identify extraordinary talent in public schools in marginalized communities. The program, funded in part by the severance package Marcus had received from the university, had already found 3 promising young people. Meanwhile, 800 kilometers away at a small community college in rural Pennsylvania, Richard Coleman taught basic physics to uninterested freshmen. After being fired for just cause, his reputation was destroyed. No prestigious institution would accept his resume, and his most important publications had been retracted from scientific journals after being proven to be plagiarized. His arrogance had cost him everything. After the inaugural lecture, Dr. Peterson, the same man who had evaluated Marcus' work on the committee, approached him. That theorem on practical applications of quantum mechanics in computing, it's absolutely brilliant. Thank you, Marcus replied. But it's not entirely my doing. It's the result of a study group I formed in Newark. Bright young people with no formal educational opportunities. This was the biggest twist of all. Marcus had turned his classroom at Princeton into a hub connected virtually with dozens of talented young people from marginalized communities, creating a model of collaborative education that challenged academic elitism. His first official publication, Democratizing Scientific Knowledge, a model for radical inclusion in theoretical physics, was generating as much interest as his discoveries in quantum physics. At the end of the day, as he crossed campus, Marcus paused in front of the physics building, looking at his name, newly added to the faculty plaque. A small group of black first-year students approached him shyly. "Professor Johnson," said one young woman, "we formed a study group inspired by your story. Some of us almost gave up before we heard about you." Marcus smiled, remembering himself just a few months earlier. "The greatest obstacle to knowledge has never been our ability," he said. "It's been the world convincing us that we don't belong in certain spaces. But when you prove your worth, no matter how much they try to diminish you, you don't just open doors for yourself. You create passageways for everyone who comes after you." That night, in his new apartment near campus, Marcus sat down to review the resume of a promising young man from Chicago that Min had identified. In the corner of his desk, framed, was the rejection letter Princeton had sent him 3 times. Next to it, a handwritten note: "Sometimes you have to break down the door they insist on closing for you." Marcus Johnson's story reminds us that true genius is not measured by knowledge alone, but by the courage to face a system designed to exclude. And that true justice is not just winning. It's changing the rules of the game so that others can win, too. If you faced obstacles that seemed insurmountable just because of who you are, leave your story of overcoming them in the comments. And don't forget to sign up for more stories that prove that the greatest revolution begins when we decide not to accept the limits that others try to impose on black voices.